I think he had some shrapnel in a couple of places in his body. He was in he was in Okinawa and Leyte and Saipan and Wake Island and Iwo Jima. In his mementos that I have, there is the arm bone of a Japanese soldier.
How'd he come by those?
I have no idea, but there it is.
What he was on a supply ship?
No, he was on what was called the Landing Craft Infantry. It was a LCI. It's a small ship that had twice as many men on it that it had room for, apparently. And they loaded it. It was supposed its function was to take soldiers from the battleship and from the destroyers right up to shore. They could go right up to shore because they only took water up to a certain level, so they could go in and dump the soldiers off and go back. But they had also, by the time the war was raging, they had outfitted it with big guns, so they could also shoot at kamikaze planes, or they could fire into the shore to soften up the shore as they were coming in, so soldiers could get. But when you're doing that, you're seeing a lot of people killed. You are in danger of being killed yourself. And
because if you shoot, they shoot back.
Yeah, and if you don't shoot, they shoot back. And in the earlier episode of this, I talk about him seeing a headless body bobbing in the water that really haunted him, and seeing a kamikaze plane coming right at them at the last moment, pulled up and hit a destroyer right beyond them. If it hit them, they would have all been killed because it was just a small ship. So the soldiers seeing a bigger ship hit that instead of my dad's ship. But I can see so many ways and so many instances in which he might not have survived, or he could have come back and been such an emotional wreck that he could have been, like a lot of people who came back from the war, shell-shocked, PTSD, become dysfunctional.
How long was he gone?
He couldn't have been gone. He didn't join the army or didn't join the war until I think the end of 43 or in 44 sometime. So it would have been not a long time, but long enough to have seen a lot of horror. He talks about coming back, and the most beautiful sight he said I think I ever saw was the Golden Gate Bridge. As they're coming in.
Oh, I bet.
Where he had sailed out of there and was coming back to that, and then ultimately came and got Billy and me from the foster home.
He must have liked the Navy after all his problems with women and work, being in a clean, all-male atmosphere with a lot of structure and...
Yeah, he joined the Navy because he didn't want to be in the dirt.
Yeah.
So, but Dad was a very clean guy. He was kind of unkempt in some ways, as I am, but he was clean.
I remember visiting him once, and you guys doing home teaching, and him just being disgusted by a dirty house. So I believe that.
Yeah. So, yeah, that's probably. I think he said he joined the Navy because he didn't want to be running around on the ground digging into trenches and stuff. He was a product of his time. He was a racist. He was sexist, as everybody was. I grew up in a home in which every minority had its name. And
I heard him use a few.
Yeah. And
how'd that square with the gospel?
Nobody thought that was inappropriate. It's just the way people talked. It's what they saw. It was deeply embedded in the culture, and it was in the church culture.
And I'm sure being in the service didn't make
that
any.
Well, except in the service, you are cheek to jowl with minorities. It's in some ways it was good. He had friendships and camaraderie. I mean, there was something about going to war that makes strong friendships. but I think it had a devastating effect on him.
Mm.
I think he couldn't really ever escape from it.
Mm-hmm. Did you notice a change in him when he came back?
I hadn't lived with him consistently enough. When he came back to get me when I was 4, I just saw this big, gruff, dark guy standing there who came to get me, and I hid behind Mom because I didn't know who he was, and I certainly didn't want to go with him. Then I lived with him for a while, and then went back to Mom, and then lived with him and Faye, and then so it was. There was not enough contact for me to think about consistency of
Mm-hmm.
behavior, but his alcoholism was something I was familiar with, because he came home on furlough once to Durango, and got drunk and came home to Mom's house, and it's not a pretty sight. But anyway, but long ago I forgave my parents. I just felt it was such a hard time, and my poor mother, wounded from an early age, and I don't know about what caused Dad's depression and all of the drinking and all of that. But
do you think his other siblings had any of the same depression?
I never saw evidence of it, and I think Nona said something about him. He was responsible for a fire burning down their house when he was about 10. They were playing a game of cards, and Grandma sent him to get something in the closet, and he took a candle, and the curtain got set on fire. He went back to playing the game, and by the time they realized the house was on fire, they just saved themselves. He may have felt guilty about that. Nona or Margie, one said that he had hit his head at one point, and they wondered about that. Who knows? I just don't have any idea.
Wasn't there another incident of
A fire? There was another incident when Dad came back to Durango, we were back in Colorado for some reason. Bill and I were living with him, and he was dating a woman, and he said he wanted her to be a mother to his motherless children, and she rejected him, and he started a fire at her place. And again, could have been put in prison.
Yeah.
I mean, that was another very irresponsible thing to do. But again, I don't know the full story, but I think there's maybe a newspaper clipping somewhere that local man burns house down or something. So I don't know.
Do you think he ever conquered that depression?
In some ways he did. I think there were periods of time when I think Dad was happy and functional, and I think the gospel probably, during the times he was living the gospel, I think he was the happiest in his life.
What would make him fall off the wagon?
Well, I'm trying to remember, these episodes, being divorced, having your family split up, being unable to quell the images of war or the demons, the dark demons. Addiction is a very powerful thing, and I think again, self-medicating is something we understand much more about these days. So